In today's video, we're going to be talking about 5 Red Dead Redemption 2 secrets and mysteries that have finally been solved 7 years later thanks to an interview with Rockstar Games' former co-founder Dan Houser. So that's right, Rockstar Games co-founder and lead writer of Red Dead Redemption 2, Dan Houser, has answered a ton of questions about Red Dead Redemption 2 in a new and unprecedented interview with podcaster Lex Fridman. I'll leave a link to it in the description. It's nearly 3 hours long, but in it, we're able to solve really 5 Red Dead Redemption 2 mysteries that we didn't really have clear answers on until now. And Red Dead Redemption 2 just turned 7 years old, so finding out these mysteries is pretty cool. So anyways, let's dive into it. So number 1, Arthur Morgan was supposed to have a baby at the beginning of Red Dead Redemption 2. This is a rumor that I had heard about a couple times over the years, but it's now finally been confirmed by Dan Houser. Arthur was supposed to have a baby, which would have died at the beginning of the story, which was cut. And Dan said that this was the right opinion and was too tough in some ways. So what Dan was trying to do with Arthur Morgan is they were trying to have him be rough and unlikable at the beginning of the story so that his redemption arc by the end of the story, where he becomes this good outlaw that ultimately sacrifices himself, is even more complete and is even more tear-jerking and heartbreaking when it's all said and done. And Dan goes on to say that Arthur was not very nice to the girlfriend that had the baby that died, and that he was very rough and unlikable. And while they wanted him to be rough and a little bit tougher at the beginning, they didn't want him to be so unlikable that fans were put off from him at the very start. So that would have been wild if that was part of the prologue, Arthur Morgan having a baby that he would have had to take care of, or that had been one of the opening scenes, getting the news that Arthur's child had passed away. It would have also had introduced another new character to the gang initially, and that would have been Arthur's girlfriend, the mother of the child. How would she have been involved in the gang as time went on? This leads to so many different questions and what ifs and what might have been and what could have happened. But that was the first thing that Dan Houser revealed, was that Arthur Morgan was supposed to officially have a baby and child at the beginning and in the prologue, and it would have completely impacted his story and his redemption arc as things progressed. The second thing Dan Houser gives us more clarity on is the Gavin mystery. So they dove deep into some of the side characters, and Fridman asked Houser, quote, "The biggest and most important question, the number one question from the internet, it's so ridiculous, but I must ask, have you seen Gavin?" And Houser's immediate response was to laugh. Now, for those of you guys that don't know, this refers to a man not seen in game, but rather we learn details about him from his friend Nigel, who can be found trying to find his friend who he claims disappeared. Now, Nigel can be found a few times throughout the game's timeline with different interactions, and due to the interesting nature of these interactions, there have been a fair few theories posted online as to who Gavin is. In fact, when Red Dead Redemption 2 came out, I made several videos on the Gavin mystery as to who he might be, what his relationship to Nigel is, whether he's a made-up person or not. Feel free to go back and watch those videos if you want, but it is a topic that I've covered quite extensively here on the channel. Well, Dan Houser has now confirmed who Gavin is, sort of. Dan says that Gavin, in his mind, is somewhere in between two theories. One of them is that Gavin is technically Nigel, and vice versa, with the man suffering from an identity disorder. And the other is that Gavin is dead. Dan goes on to say it was meant to be more of a mystery that was adventurous without being completely clear on what it actually was. Rockstar did not want to explicitly explain Gavin is not here anymore by either going home or left Nigel. And to top it off, Dan Houser suggests they left it open for the team to, quote, keep exploring the idea if it was going to reappear in one way or another. So Dan Houser essentially confirms that the mystery of Gavin and Nigel could reappear in future Red Dead titles, which would be so crazy. And last but not least, Dan reveals that the letter from Gavin to Nigel was actually written by him and Michael Unsworth, and they talked in depth about how people would read the letter. So it's crazy to just see how much time and the level of detail was put into this mystery, seemingly something that hasn't even been completed. But Dan Houser gives us his ideas for what it was supposed to be and his theories on what might happen next, which is very cool. The third thing that Dan Houser and Lex talk about is the Strange Man, and this character has spawned many of theories. Featuring a black suit, top hat, and mustache, the person has intrigued fans of the game for years, given his unexplainable encounters with the player. He appears both in Red Dead Redemption 2 and in Red Dead Redemption, and Hauser and his team of writers actually came up with him in a speedy fashion due to Red Dead Redemption 1 being boring. So side content was added to make the game more interesting, and the Strange Man specifically came much later in development as they felt the main story was short. So they had the idea of a weird character and then later brought him into the main story. And as you did things as John in the core narrative, he would add to those actions. Hauser calls him, quote, a commentary on what you were doing, and he said that he was meant to be a manifestation of your shadow, your karma, the devil. Dan doesn't say if he only follows you or everyone, though. So essentially, the Strange Man is supposed to act as your conscience and how your actions in the world affect other people. And we sort of see that with Red Dead Redemption 2 because Rockstar was able to build on his character a little bit more, especially with that cabin in the Saint Denis swamp that would evolve and grow over time as you did specific things in the world. So that goes on to fit that theory a ton. But essentially, Dan Hauser confirming that the Strange Man is your karma, your shadow, the devil, whatever it's going to be, some sort of fictional character that exists in both John and Arthur, which is very cool. Moving on to our fourth mystery, and that is Arthur's tuberculosis, which was ultimately the cause of his death in Red Dead Redemption 2. We've talked about many a times on the channel how Arthur could have prevented this, where he seemingly got it. He got it in an act of beating up a farmer for a couple of dollars and coughing and spitting the blood on his face. And a lot of people, including myself, have said if Arthur didn't go to that interaction or if he was more careful, he wouldn't have gotten the tuberculosis. Well, Dan Hauser reveals that Arthur getting tuberculosis was inspired by his grandfather, who had tuberculosis prior to antibiotics and right after Dan's father was born. Now, Dan's father survived, but only 3 out of the 35 fellow patients did. And Dan learned a lot about this, and he became fascinated with tuberculosis as an illness, which ultimately led to the creation of Arthur's phenomenal redemption arc in Red Dead Redemption 2. So that is an absolutely wild story that the cause of Arthur's death, the main character in Red Dead Redemption 2, was inspired by something that happened in Dan Hauser's real life with his own father getting tuberculosis and surviving, as only 10% of people that had a similar condition to him ultimately did. That is absolutely incredible. Just a wild story right there. It's so cool that he ended up sharing those sort of details. And last but not least, number 5, Dan Hauser reveals just how difficult the development process was for Red Dead Redemption 2, revealing that Rockstar was, quote, way over budget and way behind on schedule on Red Dead Redemption 2, which led to a lot of pressure and doubt towards them. And what's even crazier about that is Red Dead Redemption 2 is considered to be one of the best video games of all time. So the fact that it had such a chaotic development phase is shocking. And it kind of should make us wonder about Grand Theft Auto 6 going through the same thing. Grand Theft Auto 6 is probably considered way over budget and way behind schedule, and that's why Rockstar probably has to do these delays, because they are under so much pressure, but they want these games to be perfect, which in the case of Red Dead Redemption 2, the game was absolutely perfect. It's an absolute masterpiece, but even Dan Hauser reveals it was over budget and way behind schedule, which is fascinating. But anyways, that is all the information that I've got for you guys in this video today, and that is 5 Red Dead Redemption 2 mysteries and secrets that have finally been solved 7 years later thanks to an incredible interview with Rockstar Games co-founder Dan Hauser. Let me know which of these mysteries and secrets that have been solved did you find the most interesting in those comments down below. I'd love to hear from you guys down there. If you guys did go on to enjoy this video, though, a like rating would, of course, be awesome. And be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel if you are new. You want to stay up to date on all the Rockstar Games videos that I'll be doing here on my channel. And be sure to ring that notification bell as well. Sometimes YouTube just doesn't work, and if you ring that bell, you'll always be guaranteed to be notified when new videos arrive. But of course, as always, guys, thank you all so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you guys in the next video.